Good afternoon, and appreciate you all being here. Welcome to the third meeting of the Regional Rail Transit Advisory Working Group. Ms. Rowe, will you please call the roll?
Senator Daly.
Here.
Mr. Anderson. Mr. Blitch. Ms. Foose.
Present.
Mr. Gee.
Here.
Mr. Hester.
Here.
Commissioner Jones. Mr. Kinson. Mr. Martinovich.
Here.
Ms. Maynard Carey.
Here.
Mr. Mortensen. Mr. Snow.
Here.
Ms. Barnett.
Here.
Mr. Burke. Mr. Christensen.
Here.
Mr. Lawson.
Here.
Ms. Frank.
Here.
And Chair Carter.
I'm present, and please, if anyone's absent and excused, please mark them absent excused. If anyone's missing, please record their name as present when they arrive. And as you probably heard, we've added a few members to this committee, 2 representatives from the general contracting world, and I can't remember, I know that Ann Barnett down at the end, and I can't remember his name from up north. So he's probably already mad at me, but he didn't show up today anyway. So, and then we have Ross Kinson has replaced the previous member from Labor up north. And then we have Mayor Ed Lawson, the mayor of Sparks, which is, that's part of the critical areas where we got to figure out transportation between his community and the Tahoe Reno Industrial Complex. And we have a representative from the rail industry, Gabe Christensen and Tara Frank. And I really appreciate you all joining us. We're trying to make sure that we have the proper voices in the room and that everybody gets heard. And with that, we're going to, well, I guess I have to do housekeeping, excuse me. Before we begin, I would like to cover some housekeeping reminders for the members and those who are here to provide testimony. Please set your electronic devices to silent. When speaking, identify yourself for the record each time you speak. When testifying, turn the microphone on to speak and off each time you have finished speaking. For those joining us in the audience, please sign in at the table near the entrance at each location, even if you do not plan to testify. Meeting materials received prior to the meeting have been uploaded to the working group's webpage. You can receive electronic notifications of the working group's agendas, minutes, and final report by signing up on the Nevada Legislature's website. And with that being said, I should have read, never mind. We're going to move into agenda item 2, public comment. If there's anybody here in Las Vegas that wishes to make public comment, please step forward. Seeing none, let's move up to Carson City. Is anybody up there wishing to make public comment? And does not appear so. And so with that, we'll move to AVS. Is there anybody on the phone lines?
If you would like to provide public comment, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 774, please press *6 to unmute your phone. You may begin.
Greetings, my name is Damian Cole. I'm a current employee at the Gigafactory outside of Reno, Nevada, where I make a daily commute using the complimentary shuttle bus provided by Tesla. I am absolutely for rail heading out to the TRAC complex, but it must be light rail, not heavy rail. Heavy rail will not work. Why is this? During good traffic, a car trip from Reno to Trick usually takes about 30 to 40 minutes. We already have free buses, which can hold roughly 50 people. If often, they are not often at full capacity, if ever. Car owners who elect to take the shuttle drive their car to a location, park it, exit their car, wait for a shuttle, board the shuttle, take the trip, and with good traffic, it usually takes 30, 40 minutes. I examined the area that RTC recently published a feasibility study and looked at the routes that were recommended. The recommended route that they have is infeasible. My calculations show that it's about 17% maximum grade. Your average rail commuter can only go about 7%, and with 4 or 5 cars at maximum, depending on if you pull or push it. This means that car drivers would have to exit their car, get on a rail commuter, get off on a station, and then have a shuttle take them to their final destination. This means it's going to be even less. We need to get people out of cars. That's the idea. And the only way you can do that is to have a light rail system within the Reno-Sparks regional area, so that way people don't have to get in their car in the first place. If you do that, then rail suddenly looks way more attractive. If you look at the San Diego rail system and even the one in Los Angeles, there are way more attractive routes that might take a little bit longer due to their layout, but for us, it would make way more sense. And that's basically it. Ironically, we have to get people out of their cars to go to the car factory to make more cars. It might actually not be a good idea to put a car factory out there in the middle of nowhere in the first place, but yeah, that's about it. That's pretty much it. We basically need to use light rail instead of heavy rail. Otherwise, the inconvenience, if people aren't taking the shuttle now, they're not going to take heavy rail because it's going to be just as inconvenient. So we have to use light rail. Thank you very much.
Thank you. AVH, next caller, please.
Chair, there are no other callers to provide public comment at this time.
Thank you all very much. There will be a second period of public comment at the end of today's agenda. And with that, we'll move into agenda. Oh, please mark Commissioner Jones present. And we'll move into agenda item 3, an overview of public transit systems and recent developments across the states. And
Mr. Chair, that might be, this is Art Gazzetti. Would that be me on the agenda?
yes, sir, that is you. I apologize. You're up.
Very, very good. Thank you. Let me pull up slides here. Okay, excuse me. Is my screen being shared?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
It is. Okay, and let me do this. Voila. Whoops, except I'm a little bit ahead of myself here. Okay. Good afternoon, Chair Carter and distinguished members of the Regional Rail Transit Advisory Working Group. I am Arthur Gazzetti. I'm Vice President for Policy, Mobility, Technical Services, and Innovation at the American Public Transportation Association in Washington, D.C. Thank you for the invitation to speak with you today about the national experience with rail investments and how such rail systems are planned, developed, and funded in various states around the country. I first want to acknowledge several members of the advisory committee who I work especially close with in my daily activities. MJ Maynard Carey, Chief Executive Officer of the Regional Transportation Commission of Southern Nevada. MJ is the immediate past chair of my organization, the American Public Transportation Association, where she served with distinction in leading the nation's transit industry. Also, Jim Gee, Director of Public Transportation and Operations at the Regional Commission of Washoe County, gained experience as a transit executive, not only in Nevada, but in Ohio and in other states. And much appreciation for Justin Jones, who serves as the Clark County Commission, on the Clark County Commission, but also as chair of the Regional Transportation Commission of Southern Nevada. A bit about APTA. APTA is the National Association for all the North American public transit agencies and the businesses and other organizations that support them. If you're a transit agency in North America, you're likely a member of APTA. We cover like 95%. We are a full service association generating industry statistics, training, research, conferences, publications, standards, advocacy, all of that. Our roots go back to 1882. And for many decades, we've navigated change in the public transportation community. And you see the photo there of the horse-drawn streetcars. That's our roots go back before the internal combustion engine. I bring greetings from Washington, but in the case of today, it happens to be Wenatchee, Washington, the Apple capital of the world, working with the transit system here on some issues they're facing. That's what we do at APTA, so I went from one Washington to the other. Personally, I have a long and rich career in public transportation in New Jersey Department of Transportation, New Jersey Transit, Pittsburgh Regional Transit, and APTA. Whoops, I'm sorry, I wasn't flicking my slide. Here's the slide I meant when I referenced the horse-drawn streetcar. These are APTA's roots, 1882, voila. Real quickly, here's what I'm going to talk about for the next 10 or so minutes. Why rail? Rail projects of all kinds. You heard a couple mentioned already, heavy rail, light rail, etc. Some recent commuter rail and regional rail projects, recent light rail projects. Then a lot of emphasis on getting it done. How do other places that have brought these systems into place, how have they done it? Let me highlight this phrase, federal, state, local partnerships. Talk a little bit about the momentum, and then if there's time, Mr. Chair, we can have questions and discussion. Happy to do that. Okay, why rail? There's 8 reasons. One is importance to tourist economies. I take it that is a big thing in Nevada. A lot of people like to come there, myself included, but a lot of people come there without a car. They come to the airport. They'll soon come by rail from California. So if they get there without a car, maybe they can get around the community without a car. So I'll have more to say on that in a minute. Second reason would be more people with less space, geospatial. It adds to your community. I think the overall effect of your community when you can have that movement of people, but without the myriad of cars and the myriad of parking that's required. Perhaps close to that is focused development. We call it sometimes transit-oriented development, transit-oriented communities. Development land goes hand in hand with the transportation system it's built upon, always has been, always will be. Centuries and centuries of evidence to base that on. Focused development is another thing. I think of places, again, coming from Washington, D.C., how the Washington metro system has transformed the area. I could give you one neighborhood after another, Bethesda, Arlington County, U Street, the Noma neighborhood, Potomac Yards, etc. Long-term community vision, wide lanes of congested traffic. Probably there might be a different vision for the community that's walkable, balanced. You're certainly going to need streets. You're certainly going to need automobile traffic, but a balanced vision. And generation appeal of vibrant, exciting places is perhaps the way looking forward. Economic return, we've just reproduced a report. We can commend it, share it with you. Every $1 spent, or let's say $1 billion spent on public transportation brings a 5-to-1 economic return through the access and productivity improvements and alternatives to traffic. If we can't totally do away with traffic congestion, maybe provide an alternative to it is a good thing. A few years ago, and I mention this because I know we partnered with the Las Vegas community in doing it. We also partnered with the U.S. Travel Association That's the National Association of all the convention bureaus. So I said, wow, if they're clamoring for transit, I'd like to partner with them. And they showed that it makes a difference for conventions, for the big hotels that you have to have a rail connection connecting to the airport and increases their competitiveness. Now, let me just flag this. I won't go into depth, although I certainly could. There's different kinds of rail. There's heavy rail. This is basically the subways and the sometimes elevated in Chicago, but it's that kind of big trains. Contrast that, and I'll say there's around the country, there are 16 of those types of systems. Then streetcars. Okay, streetcars is maybe the opposite. It's a train, but it's operating on the street. There's not as much infrastructure. Light rail is sort of in between. It's not heavy rail with the capacity that heavy rail can provide. It often goes in the streets. There's not as much infrastructure as heavy rail. So it's somewhere in between streetcar and heavy rail, light rail. We also have commuter rail. These are, some people would call the real trains, often going into the suburbs. At one time, it was for commuting primarily. Now that's changing in different ways. There are 30 commuter railroads around the country, 22 light rail systems, according to our statistics, 25 streetcars. Then there's also intercity rail. High-speed rail would be part of that, and regional rail, which sometimes can be commuter rail, but sometimes, again, that might be something in between commuter rail and intercity rail in terms of distance. I'd like to talk, and I have too much to say for the time I have, so I will keep it short. But I just mentioned 3 commuter rail projects to give you some examples to consider as you think of your own thing. But I want to say about commuter rail, how they came to be. Commuter rail systems are evolving. I alluded to this before. So they're in a period of change. They're moving more towards service throughout the day, not just during the commute periods. I think that's part of the rationale for changing the name away from commuter rail to regional rail. Denver is an example of systems. And by the way, Denver has it all. It has commuter rail, it has light rail, it has bus rapid transit. It has 10 train lines all together. But the commuter rail lines were built through a public-private partnership known as the Eagle P3. And I'd say significantly, the development of this rail system, both commuter rail and light rail, was sparked by a 2004 ballot measure called Fast Tracks. And that's a testament to the collaboration and the power of collaboration. When you get your business community, your elected officials, your grassroots folks all working together, big things can happen. Now, again, there's challenges as well. I don't want to overlook those. For example, Denver has faced challenges to keep very ambitious projects, 10 rail lines, right? To keep a schedule on that. 20 years later, take a look at it. The proof is in the pudding. But also, you know, it's a continuous challenge with deadlines. Infrastructure projects are hard. The funding all has to be in place. The public-private partnership was based on sort of risk, assigning a lot of risk to the business sector. But then there was dispute. What is a reasonable risk and whatnot? Dallas, I mentioned them because they just opened a commuter rail line called the Cotton Belt Line and Silver Line. Only in October of 2025. It's 26 miles long, connecting the suburbs, connecting to the airport. They purchased a freight line to get it done. They got a federal low-interest loan to help facilitate the construction. They're using something called hybrid rail, and that's basically a light rail train on heavy rail tracks. So it's actually operating on part of what they call the National Railroad System, which basically requires a crashworthiness standard. But you know, there's ways that they could do it. A lighter vehicle is going to provide a different kind of service, perhaps a more appropriate service that they wanted to provide on that line. So, and Salt Lake City, I highlight them because they, again, another system that operates the light rail, another system connects to the airport, another system sparked by a referendum by the voters. They're considering opening a new line. They want to increase the frequency. They've opened the line, I'm going to say 20 years ago, 15 perhaps. But now they're to the point they want to increase the frequency, and to do that, they're going to have to build more tracks. Portions of the line are single track. So they're advancing that. And the funding plan includes a combination of sales taxes, state vehicle license, federal formula and discretionary grants, fare box collections, all of those, all of the above. Let me move to light rail. And offer several examples of some systems. Here's 4 systems. I might offer a few more. Each of them developed through a federal, state, local partnership. FTA, the Federal Transit Administration, is very typically, not always, but almost always a partner in this. They have a planning process they go through, capital investment grant process. They have criteria under which they evaluate projects. They put projects into what they call a pipeline to advance them. I will say among the various criteria, which includes economic criteria, community development criteria, efficiency, square one, you don't get past square one if you don't have the financial capacity. You want to go into this process with a strong self-help foundation from your community. If you go in and say, well, we don't have any money, but maybe we can get federal money, that's absolutely the wrong way to begin. Typically, even when you get strong federal support, it's only going to be 40 or 50%. You have to come up with the rest of it on your own. I will just mention a few of these. San Diego is notable because it was the first. Again, I mentioned you had heavy rail, subways, you had streetcars, but then in the early 80s, they said, well, how about something in between that takes the best of both worlds? Light rail was developed. San Diego and Portland were the first 2. It's been, steadily growing. It's not huge. There are systems bigger. They have currently 67 miles, the last extension opening in 2024. But it's productive. It carries 124,000 riders a day, every work day. So that's second highest among all systems. Let me mention Phoenix is a city that grew up around the automobile. The development patterns are automobile oriented, but they said they had some visionary mayors, a visionary business community. And they said, well, maybe that's the way we develop, but that's not the way we need to be going forward. And it started with the voter referendum. They had some champions to push it, and they've been steadily opening a system over the years that connects universities. Arizona State, for example, it connects sports facilities. They had a Super Bowl there a couple years ago. It connects their airport. It connects all the communities in the Valley of the Sun. They had a recent opening just last year as well. Other openings last year, Honolulu opened a line, Seattle opened another extension. They're building a lot in Seattle. Let me make a note here about federal funds, just to give you some illustrative examples of the cost. So we have to have our eyes wide open, right? These things are expensive, they complex, they can be done. They can be done one example after another on that. And again, there's federal grants, capital investment grants that often help. There are other sources too. I'll mention those in a minute. But the Phoenix capital extension currently under consideration, another extension, $397 million. The plan they're working on, you negotiate this to a degree, 49% federal funds. So the federal share will be $195 million. So that's the cost, what the feds so far are willing to put up. Eventually you get to what they call a full funding grant agreement, which is called a legally binding deal. Austin has a project in the pipeline, $8 billion, big. They passed a referendum in Austin a few years ago. So the voters approved this. The voters say this is what they want and are willing to pay for it through their taxes. It is $8 billion, 49% federal. So the feds will say they're come through with $4 billion $67,000. Portland and Vancouver, line to connect them, $183 million, 55% feds. So the feds are willing to pony up because they've advanced with the criteria, $100 million. Minneapolis Blue Line extension, $3.5 billion project. In that case, 21% federal money. So the feds say they're in for 750 million for that. Now, let me mention one other one here, and that's Los Angeles, East Fernando Valley, expedited. That's what they call expedited project delivery. That means the feds say, we'll help move your project along quicker, but you have to settle for 25%. You settle for 25%, we'll work with you to help move it along. Mr. Chair, please cut me off when I start to get long. But I do have some things that I would like to share. Oh, thank you. I'm getting into the funding now, which is, by the way, my long career. And you put me down as one of those baby boomers, please. But that's been the core of my career, getting funds to support transit. So this is what I do. FTA. Here's some of the potential federal funding sources. Again, I could give a speech on every one of these, but FTA formula money, that's driven by your service data in your region. There's a formula, again, that brings money back to you based on a bunch of determined factors: route miles, passenger miles, population to a degree. Then there's the Federal Capital Investment Grant Program. That's really the one I was talking about a minute ago. You're competing for that against other regions of the country on criteria, and yes, politics comes into play here too. But there is a good process for sorting out a lot of those questions. FHWA, that's Federal Highway Administration flexible funding. The law allows you, if your state DOT says, well, we have highway needs, but transit needs for this particular year are especially acute, especially needy, you can flex money. And a lot of people have done it. About $2 billion a year nationwide gets flexed from highways to transit. The Federal Railroad Administration, if your project is that regional rail type thing, you can qualify for some of these. They have as we speak right now, $5 billion with a B. $5 billion is on the street in what they call a notice of funding availability, NOFO, for these kind of projects. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act made a big commitment in this area, and there's money to be used. The FRA Quarter ID program is more of a planning program. It's to say, well, we're just getting started here. How can we do the basic thinking to get our project ready? US DOT discretionary infrastructure grants. This is, their program's called Infra Build. You're just putting out, a proposal to say you have infrastructure money going to the highest need, the best projects. We have one of those right in our community. Real estate, that's great to think about because that's why the private sector, sometimes like Brightline, they're interested in real estate. Real estate gains value because of the access provided through your transportation system. So there's a way to connect one with the other. A lot to talk about there. Private assumption of risk. This isn't really a revenue source, and usually when you have a public-private partnership, this is what's going on, unless there's money to be made through real estate. You're talking about the private sector coming on as a partner so they can take the risk. If there is a increase in costs, they sign up for that going in. They say, you pay us according to this schedule, we'll take the risk, we'll deliver your project for you. Again, you pay more for that up front, but they take the risk through the project. So there are federal low-cost loan programs. TIFIA is one. There's another one called RRIF. But there's momentum for rail. The Infrastructure and Investment and Jobs Act, we're at a high level right now. We want to sustain that. We need to get that reauthorized. We need all your help on that this year. But when I say momentum for rail, there's international trends. We're catching up to the world on a lot of this, but there's the funds to do it. There's the commitment to do it. We need to sustain that. And the public is voting with its feet. I'll talk about that in a minute. State and local revenue sources, look at this list. So many different ways. So many different communities fund transit in different ways. I commend this list to you. You might say, which is the which one is best? The one that can get the votes is the one that's best on that. Again, lot to talk about here, but I'll move on. Innovative finance. Here's a project. This is in Washington, D.C., the Dulles Airport extension of the Washington Metro system. They funded through tolls, road tolls. Of course, they've done that in Denton County too and in other places. Tax increment financing, a special tax district, airport facility charges. So, every air ticket has a 3% passive PFC fee on it, and you can use it for whatever regional needs you have, whether that be for the airport or access to the airport. They got money from the state and they got a full funding grant agreement. Ballot measures. Let me talk about this for a moment. Look how they're passing, 84%. What could be more reflective of the public sentiment than that? You're asking them straight up, here's a project for you, and are you willing to raise your taxes to pay for it? Last year, $12 billion was raised on November 5th alone, one day, $12 billion, long-term, dedicated, multi-year funds. Charlotte was the big project last year in 2024. Again, 80+%. Nashville, Columbus, Miami, and Phoenix were among the projects there. This happens every year. I could give you more stats. And I would say it's the most dear of all funds because it's dedicated, it's multi-year, it's local, and it's endorsed by the voters. So that's pretty powerful statement right there. Just to show that they come in various ways. You can have a ballot measure for any of these reasons. Here's some of the systems this year, the regions that are looking at the ballot this year. Not all of these are official, but all of them are in the news, in the newspaper. So I think that's official enough for me to talk about it. And you'll see that here on this chart. And by the way, Alex, I've updated this a bit since the slides, Mr. Chair, in your packets. So I will make sure this updated list is available to you. Presentation. Yeah, I think this is interesting, and this is not intended to be a political statement. It's just saying that transit has appeal. We say, okay, how did people cross? If people voted for Trump, how did they vote? And here's to show in different regions around the country, people voted for transit also voted for Trump. Of course, people voted for transit also voted for Democrats too, but it shows that it certainly goes both ways. APTA has something we call the Center for Transportation Excellence that helps with ballot measures. There are people who have been through campaigns, people who know the campaign drill and have the experience of having done so. So we do have a little team that can be helpful to communities considering ballot elections and sort of the pre-campaign activities that are absolutely necessary. So, final slide. It's not all about ballot measures. It's not all about local revenues. It's states as well. So how are the states doing? Well, this is just in the last couple years. All of these states have stepped up to support transit. I could, again, talk about each one. Illinois, Michigan, Washington State, Minnesota, Colorado, Indiana, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. And with that, I will close. If we have time for discussion, I'm happy to do it. I'm happy to also follow up with any materials that would be useful. And I thank you for your time and attention.
Very good. Thank you very much. And yeah, we will open it up. We'll start up here in Las Vegas. If any members of the committee have any questions.
Hugh Anderson for the record. Thank you for the presentation, sir. I just had a question. In the packet, in your presentation, the slide about federal resources is not in the package, so forgive me. But in looking at the Dulles Metro Rail extension pie of resources, that 16% segment, is that was that derived from that long laundry list of federal resources? Or was this done before all of those resources were available, since you said some of them are fairly new?
Yeah, let me pull that up here. Thank you. Yes, and you're right. The federal resources was one of the ones I added. Actually, it's not that I added it. I forgot to put it in initially. Oh, yes. And the question is the 16%, that's the county contribution? Was it?
According to the pie chart, it was the federal contribution.
All federal. Yeah. And the question is that what eventually came to be?
Well, I guess the fairy tale question is, with that long laundry list of federal resources there,
Yeah.
is it conceivable to cobble together a significantly larger portion of the funding pie from those
Yes.
federal lists?
Yes. That very, very good question. I use that as a way to show that it can be innovative. Innovation helps. You know, it was a big project. So even 16% federal money is a lot of federal money. And capacity is a big factor. You come in with more weight, the more you bring to the table. So I think rather than to say, oh, we got shortchanged only 16%, I think it was probably good strategy because they come in with money. And by the way, you can see the money is derived in a whole bunch of different ways. It's not just taxes. There's a nice mix of revenue ideas here, and that's partly how they sold it. And it's not only leveraging that money to attract federal money, it's leveraging that money in other ways too. You can leverage it for bonding, right? And you can leverage it for private sector interest. Thank you. That's the way I'd answer that.
And Mr. Snow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Art Gazzetti,
Hi, Jake.
it's been,
Yes.
I think, 13 years since we last spoke, and you're looking well. It's great to see you. I have
You
a
too,
quick
Jake.
question here. Since this is a state-appointed committee to advise the Nevada State Legislature, I know one of the things we're seriously looking at are funding sources, potentially from the state, to fund rail transit. So in your vast experience, and you alluded to this recently with one of your last slides, I seem to remember that there are several states that have big commitments to fund rail transit, not just for state-operated transit systems, but for local and regional rail systems. Could you maybe give us just a quick thumbnail sketch of which state funding sources are primarily used to fund local and regional rail transit, just off the top of your head, and maybe just give a couple of states that do really well? Could you, I think that would be very valuable for this work.
Sure, Jake. And let me say this, there is a huge range.
Or we need your name for the record when you start.
Yes, Art Gazzetti with the.
Thank you.
Yes, Art Gazzetti with the American Public Transportation Association. There is a huge range in what call it the big state contributors give in the lesser ones. Now, I will say in fairness, sometimes that's by design. The eastern states, they typically don't have a referendum. You go to your state legislatures, and if you want a referendum, you have to get permission from your state. So it's the state legislatures that often call the shots. So and that's my roots are in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. So those states typically provide a lot. I would say though, so in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Massachusetts, Illinois, by the way, just passed a bill in October to really step up their commitment to transit. Some of those other states I mentioned, Washington State had a big measure a few years ago. California does provide a lot, so it tends to be the transit-oriented states. But you have other states. Minnesota provided a lot. Colorado is another state. You have Virginia, more and more coming from Virginia. Those would be some of the states that come immediately to mind.
Thank you very much. And to Director Maynard.
MJ Maynard, Carey for the record. Art, always great to see you, and thanks it was a great presentation. It might be helpful if you talk about the cost to build a light rail has significantly increased over the last 10 years.
Yes.
Have you seen does that deter the number of projects that are in the CIG program? That's one. And secondly, do you see a difference in what is being federally supported depending on who is in the White House or which administration is in place?
Yes. Yeah, thank you, MJ. Cost escalation is a problem we have to just confront. It's out there. Some projects have slowed down, even say put on pause because of the costs. But it's our job to get that under control, and we're very dutifully doing that. Yes, I think you get a good project. That probably means with some dropping off, that means that's less competition for the funds. But I would say, yes, you go in with your eyes wide open. These things are expensive. There's ways to control the cost. There are best practices out there. But it's going to be a lot. As far as who's in the White House, we weren't sure what to expect when, the administration transition occurred in 2025. But the Trump administration came in at record levels of transit funding, record level of rail funding. And a year and a half later, there's record levels of transit funding and record level of rail funding. So infrastructure has always been viewed as an issue that transcends party lines. If you don't believe it's true, I think this current example is evidence of that, that it is true. I will say one thing, possibly also amplifying Jake Snow's question, and that's, okay, some states give how about the state sources? Some states allow their gas tax to be used, which is the typical way to fund highways, but many states view it as a multimodal source. Some states allow their gas tax to be used. I'd say that's at least maybe the indexing of it or something. So when you look at states, that's one possible avenue there. Another thing is there is a talk in Washington about registration fees. The gas tax, the federal gas tax will not be raised this year. It hasn't been raised since 1993. So what are we going to do instead? There's ideas about mileage-based user fees, but those don't seem to be politically right either. But registration fees seems to be an idea that might have some resonance. So you might say if your state has registration fee revenues to fund your highway program, maybe that's a good source for transit as well. So, but circling back to UNJ also, the projects are expensive, but all infrastructure projects are expensive. It's not just transit. And we're confronting it, and there are best practices and there are ways forward. There's just last year, a bunch of projects opened. Project opened in Phoenix, project opened in Seattle, project opened in Honolulu, and the list goes on and on. So we're figuring out ways.
There are other questions?
Mr.
Commissioner Jones?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Gazzetti, for your presentation.
Thank you.
If hypothetically Southern Nevada or Northern Nevada were to pursue a ballot initiative in 2028, what would you expect the transportation leaders to be doing in 2026 and 2027 to be successful?
That is an excellent question. Thank you for it, because in my view, pre-campaign activities are vital. You want to get the public ready for it. First of all, you want to do polling along the way to make sure you know where you stand, but also make sure that the people do feel good about transit going into the election, and prepare for that. Talk about all the good things that are happening. Talk about the ways that your current service is making a difference in people's lives. Stories have power. I think all the new ways of media to get the word out, but you want to build up a crescendo going into it. Of course, you want your local coalitions to be in place as well, both with business community, with political leaders. And there are a lot of case studies in that regard of people that have done it right. One I mentioned, of course, Nashville and Columbus and some of those other cities. But Charlotte was an interesting one last year because they had to overcome a public narrative that was quite difficult that involved sort of urban crime. But they, made some good decisions along the way, and they won, notwithstanding that narrative.
Thank you.
Any other questions here in Las Vegas? Ms. Barnett?
Thank you. Ann Barnett, Nevada Contractors Association for the record. Art, thank you again for your presentation. And I'm looking through what we have. It looks like we are missing a couple of pages, but I'm just trying to gather all of the state and local revenue sources that the other projects have used. And from a state and local funding perspective, how significant is property tax being used as a funding mechanism? Is it maybe the highest?
Property tax is a very common source to support transit, but the referendum typically, very often, are sales taxes or bonds. There are property tax referendum, but they tend to be smaller communities. So that's the way I would answer that. It's a good funding source. It's one of the biggest, but it tends to not be the source in larger ballot questions.
Any other questions down south? Let's move up north. Senator Skip Daly, is there any questions or comments from up in Carson City?
Yes, we have a couple. Mr. G does. I have one as well, but I'll defer to my friend here to my left.
Thank you, Senator Daly.
And I just want to state that we're going to take in, we'll push out the new, I'm sure that Mr. Gazzetti is going to take and get us an updated presentation, and we'll push that out to the members once we get it.
Chair Carter, thank you. For the record, Jim Gee, Director of Public Transit in Reno, Nevada. Art, great to see you again. Welcome back to the Pacific time zone. I have a quick question about federal funding and the use for operations. I know on the bus side, there is some opportunity to use Section 5307 dollars for preventive maintenance or for smaller systems directly for operations. Is there such a mechanism on the rail side for funding ongoing operations and maintenance for passenger rail?
Yeah, there are some things you can do, to capitalize certain costs. I have a list of things because in my prior roles I've been a grantsman, and that comes up at APTA. Should there be more flexibility in using capital money for operations? Let me say this too, Jim, that the state of Pennsylvania was facing a transit fiscal cliff just last year, and the solution they have was to allow capital funds to be used for operating. And while that did fend off a immediate crisis, in the long term, it's probably not the best policy. APTA has shied away from a widespread use of using capital for operating. Yes, you should have flexibility to a degree, but I think there is a distinction between capital funds and operating.
Thank you. Next one, Senator Daly.
Yes, down at the end here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John Hester, Washoe County citizen member. Could you tell us, here in Northern Nevada, we're hearing a lot about the Bay Area rapid transit system possibly needing to contract. Could you tell us about if that's happening very much around the country, and what are the reasons, the things that we should look out for should we develop a new system?
Yeah, the Bay Area is when I talk about the fiscal cliff, they're facing it now. It's caused by a number of factors. I won't go into that because that would be a presentation in itself. But I think a lot of the things are like, for example, before the pandemic, you worked 5 days a week. That was pretty much the thing, the way it was. After the pandemic, either you work at home or maybe you work 2 or 3 days a week. So you're talking about, say you work 2 days a week instead of 5 days a week. That's 60% less trips, right? 2 compared to 5. So your ridership is down. Your revenues are down. Your federal support for operating is down because during the pandemic, we got a lot of federal funds, Jim Gee, that could be used for operating. And by the way, thank goodness, right? Because it kept things going, kept people working, kept the economy functioning. But we've lost those things now. We don't have that federal emergency aid. We don't have, in some places, don't have the ridership that they had, the fare box revenues they had. We're in that transition period. But I would say my judgment would be don't back off the commitment to transit because of that. Because it's our duty to provide balanced system. The alternative is not very good, right? And that's more traffic, more cars. We need balance. We need to provide choices. And I think that's the vision. That's the vision. People are still approving these ballot measures, even with those changes. And changes always are going to happen. So I would say, what's your vision? What kind of community do you want to be? And if you want to be a community that has that balanced system with the options and with the placemaking, I'd say stick with transit. And I think that's what they're going to do in the Bay Area. I think the voters will stand by their transit system. They do have a good one. Muni and BART and all the other ones are assets to the region. Other regions want what they have.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Davis?
Yep, so I think I'm last, and I have 2 separate but related questions real quick. So in your slide on rail, and I know like the Bay Area has probably got a combination of several because they have all of those modals right now. So are any of the ones on your list just rail?
Yeah, a couple things. Thank you. All good questions. Your whole group here. Thank you for all. One is that first let me mention Tucson passed. It passed last week. So we're already 1 for 1 for 2026. The Front Range Colorado referendum is all rail. So they want to build that's what I would call probably not commuter rail. That would be a regional rail, linking all the cities in the Front Range of the Rocky Mountains. So that's certainly a rail project. And as you say, some of these systems are multimodal. St. Louis, for example, multimodal. Sacramento is multimodal. King County is multimodal. Yes.
Understood. And
Front Range is all rail.
Yeah, and I know that we're talking about rail here on this particular committee, but transit overall is a big issue. And there have been ballot measures in the north here on transit and in the south. When do you start that planning? As soon as possible is the answer, right? But when I look at that, and I looked it up quickly, so San Diego, 1.4 million is the population. Phoenix proper, 1.6. The MSAs are much bigger. Seattle at 800,000. Charlotte at 9.43, 943,000. And then I looked up the Reno-Sparks MSA, Metropolitan Service Area, and we're not even close. We're almost to 600,000. And that doesn't include Carson City and the rest, but because I guess our MSA is Reno-Sparks, Story County, and Lyon County. So where, in your mind, if you will, I think Las Vegas on the population side, if you did their MSA is 2 million, a little over 2 million. Where's the critical mass for some of this stuff to actually, make sense when you're moving forward? I know the time to start is yesterday, but I'm just wondering what you've seen as far as population critical mass for this type of stuff. Rail specifically.
Yeah, it's, certainly commuter rail goes into Yeah, a lot of commuter rail projects are lengthy. Like you have Indiana that goes all the way to where does Notre Dame play football? South Bend. It escaped my mind. It goes all the way to South Bend, so you're getting out there in lower density areas. Of course, it does go into Chicago, which is a strong destination. So I'd say that's the answer. Put together both ends of it. You have the origins, you have the destinations, and you have points in between. So maybe your questions are all fair. Is there a critical you had Burlington, Vermont a few years ago had a commuter rail. They don't anymore. Maybe they weren't quite big enough to pull it off. But I would say it does have to be, studied, and you're probably in a position with your type of population you would need to take a good look at it. But I think you'll find examples of places where it's worked. In similar circumstances.
And thank you for that. And that's, I'm just trying to get a feel for it on the various things. And of course, I see Clark County, Las Vegas, that metropolitan service area as a different animal, much larger population, probably much more viable as a commuter type thing to get people from the various locations around the valley into other locations in the valley and try to get people off of the roads, of course, and that would tie in with the buses and all the other things we've talked about. Here in northern Nevada, I know let's try to have and the title of our committee is regional rail, not necessarily commuter.
Yes.
But from all the experience and things that I've seen talking about transit in northern Nevada, I think the Reno Sparks area, wherever you start from, getting out to Trick and then the rest of it to the actual work locations. To me, I think that there's an appetite there. I think it could work, and I think there would be the ridership, because I don't know if you're the right guy to ask the question or later to a different presenter on, what does the ridership need to be? When does it become viable? How much do you have to charge to ride these trains in order to at least have operation and maintenance of money. Once you get it built is one thing.
Senator Daly, can we move it along? We got a big discussion period at the end, and we're getting into discussion right now.
So, sorry, Mr. Chair, and I was just curious about the one issue on ridership, and then we'll stop.
Yes. I'd say you have to do a planning study, but there are, take, for example, the Salt Lake City system. It goes through the Wasatch Valley. It connects Provo to Salt Lake City to various other smaller communities. So you'd say on their own, they probably couldn't justify a rail system, but when link it all together, there's the, multiplier effect that makes it viable. But you have to do a planning study to figure that out. Thank you.
And thank you very much. And Mayor Lawson on Zoom, do you have any questions?
No, we did have a presentation at the RTC last week, and Art was there, and I thank you for that. There's a lot more to this, and I don't know if the chair has seen that report yet, but it's very enlightening for the ridership and the cost to the two cities together.
Very good, and thank you for that. We'll make sure that we get a copy of that report and distribute it to all of the members of the committee. And with that, I got one more question down here. Mr. Kinson.
Thank you, Ross Kinson, for the record. I just have a quick question. In the beginning of your presentation, you talked about return on investment, and that typically you're seeing 5 to 1 on that return on investment. My question is where, what studies are you seeing to get to those numbers? And then 2, are there specific types of rail projects that have a higher ROI or a specific community that has a higher ROI?
Yes. Two answers. One is that we have a study that's brand new, and I'll make sure it's shared with the committee. I'll send it right after this, along with my updated presentation. That's point one. Point two, the 5-to-1 is a national number. So that's the national aggregate effect to the national economy. To determine your local impact locally, how does it play locally? We do have calculators for that. It's called My Economic Impact tool that can figure it out. But I would say the kind of factors that I would just generalize them is to say access. Are people able to connect in ways that make the economy thrive? Our regions, is the regional connectivity. Sometimes you want to connect, you want to connect what's it called? There's a word, an economic term for the how economic connectivity creates performance. And I'll think of it in a minute. And productivity. You want to make sure that there isn't lost time. People can get there. Part of that is, the congestion factor and getting around the congestion and alleviating congestion. But those are the kind of factors that drive the data. Agglomeration, that's the word I'm looking for. Agglomeration fact. That's why there's tall buildings downtowns, because you get that kind of that kind of economic performance that of working together as a regional economy.
Very good. And thank you very much, Mr. Gazzetti, for a very thorough report and fielding all of these questions perfectly. And with that, we're going to take and move on. And we're going to go slightly out of order at this point and move to agenda item 5 as our presenter has a timing conflict. With that, we will now hear from Dr. Leffel on the study of environmental impacts related to rail transit development. And please remember to state your name for the record every time you speak.
Okay, my name is Ben Leffel. I'm an assistant professor of public policy at UNLV. Since Assembly Bill 256 calls on the Regional Rail Transit Advisory Group to consider feasibility and benefits of regional and hopefully statewide metro rail or light rail, I'm going to share some findings from a recent study by myself and colleagues at UNLV, at Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, Berkeley, and including one of my PhD students, Alejandro, is in the room with us, on the ecological benefits of metro rail, including light rail and regional rail, including in Nevada and globally, and derive some recommendations from that. And when I say ecological benefits, I mean that we're looking at the cities of the world, including across Nevada, including across the entire planet. And we look at trees and other kinds of vegetation. We're finding that tree cover is the loss of tree cover is dominating global urban vegetation loss. So we're losing more trees than we are cropland, grassland, and shrubland. One of the biggest reasons for this is private transportation, right? This is a common sight from our daily lives is traffic congestion. But the reason why is because as cities become more dependent on cars, they are forced to expand and literally pave paradise into a parking lot or an extra road or an extra lane. And that expansionary forces, what it means is that it competes for the same physical space as vegetation, which in Las Vegas, it can save lives if we have tree cover because it combats the urban heat island effect. But that's in many cities that are very traffic congested. Not all cities are built the same. As shown in minimalist form here, this is actually an art piece, is the metro lines of the world. And some cities have just one metro line, maybe 2 or 3, and some have up to 30 or so. But the alleviation that metro and intercity rail, think Amtrak, provides to cities is that it takes cars off of the road and it can allow for more space to plant vegetation. And we actually take to this question and test it formally. So from 2005 to 2020, we look at car use per capita, traffic expansion, and all manner of rail in about 1/3 of the humanity, about 1,000 of the biggest cities, accounts for 63% of the GDP. We look at metro, we look at light rail, we look at intercity rail, the kind that connects regions and cities across city borders, across regional and international borders as well, to see does in fact car use drive tree loss, including in Vegas and Reno and other Nevadan cities, but also globally. And does rail infrastructure, does that allow for us to stop the bleeding, so to speak? And what this chart shows is on the bottom are cities that have no rail whatsoever. That horizontal black zero line, everything below it is tree loss as cars go up. So what the chart is answering is, as cars go up, what happens to trees? Everything below that zero line is red, and it's cities that don't have any rail whatsoever, no Amtrak, no connectivity, and it's on a global scale and also locally. And above the line is green. It shows cities that have at least a intercity connection or at least one metro line. And the horizontal axis is cars per capita. The x-axis is cars per capita. And as you can see, the green line, cities that have any even minimal rail, they're able to retain trees no matter how car dependent it gets. But if you don't have that shield, you're going to lose more trees as cars go up. And you see that with the steep slope on the bottom line. And I want to point your attention to two particular cities on this graph, and that would be Reno and Vegas. They're both roughly equal in terms of their car dependence, about 0.35 cars per person, but Reno has at least an Amtrak, and that's what allows it to retain trees relative. And when I say this difference, what is the difference here exactly? I mean, on average, we're talking about a square kilometer of tree cover. So that's roughly a quarter of New York City's Central Park or 2 Vatican cities, and there's other ways to measure it, several different football fields, but you get the idea. And so we can do better in this region if we have at least an Amtrak or at least a regional rail of that sort, particularly within the cities. So this is just looking at, do you have some or do you have none at all? But larger systems actually yield more benefits. So on the top left, it's the same vertical axis, right? Below that black zero line is none, and so you see cities. There are many cities on that on the zero line on the far left and below the zero line. But as you add more metro lines, as shown in purple, or metro stations, as shown in gold, that benefit compounds. So larger metro systems allow us to, in a linear, monotonic form, save more trees. And also in cities around the world, on the top right, it shows that as car dependence increases, it's more and more difficult to build metro stations and metro lines. But we're relatively early in that area. We're only like 0.35 cars per capita, so there's still room to build. But in any city, generally, you can build rail. It's just a matter of being able to spend the money. And in terms of what the gold standard is, on the bottom, we look at light rail versus tram versus metro. And so light rail is shown in green, and light rail is the most resilient, more or less, depending on how you measure it, number of stations or lines. Metro is shown in red, or light rail is shown in green, as we're able to retain the most trees, and tram not so much. And also we don't include monorail because although we do have a monorail in Las Vegas, by volume and by ecological advantages, it's kind of negligible. So it's not really a gold standard at all. So really we should be looking at least in terms of the ecological benefits, we should be looking at light rail or metro. And when I said that there's kind of a monotonic scaling, what I mean is that the bigger metro systems they yield greater ecological benefits. So on the bottom, the red line below the zero line, that's cities, including Las Vegas, that have nothing. They don't have a single metro line. And as car dependence, as shown on the horizontal axis, increases, they're losing more and more trees. But as you add, at least minimal metro lines, this is what the metro line by size looks like. If you have 1 to 10 lines, then it's able to be above the zero line. You're able to retain trees, and 11 to 20 lines, even more. And the biggest, the Seouls and Beijings and New York cities of the world, they are able to maintain the most. So no matter how you measure it, be it metro lines on the top or metro stations on the bottom, or on the right side, all rail lines. That's light rail plus metro plus tram. The larger the public transit rail-based system, the greater the ecological advantages in kind of a linear form. So with that, we're able to divide the cities of the world, including Reno and Las Vegas into those that are rail protected versus those that are traffic vulnerable. And to kind of just put it in one map. So blue is relatively good. It is particularly the dark blue. You're able to, as cars increase, you are able to retain more trees. And red, and particularly dark red, is bad. You're losing trees, you're more car dependent, you're losing trees as car use increases. And take a look at Europe. We know that's very densely connected by rail networks, and they're able to maintain their tree cover and all of the various environmental and the hotter it gets, the more life-saving advantages. And particularly look at China. And the reason why China is so blue is because it has the world's largest high-speed rail network. And then look at the United States. Take a good long look at it. In one picture, we see how red it is. And that's Henry Ford's god-awful legacy on the country. We're so car dependent, and we're reaping. He sold the country a vision that goes nowhere, purely for the profitability of the auto industry. And we reap the ecological disadvantages of that. And just to be sure, when I say that Europe and East Asia have bigger metro networks, here's what it really looks like. By measuring the metro stations, where bigger and greener dots indicate cities with larger metro systems by number of metro stations, it's very, very populated. And the same is true for Europe. It's very densely connected. But in the United States, it's relatively paltry. Now, the picture becomes even more clear when we look at where are the cities that have zero in those same regions. And so I represented as such. In East Asia, it's a very rare phenomenon for cities there to have absolutely nothing. And the same thing is true for Europe. It's very relatively rare. But in the United States, it's one thing that we have plenty of, nothing. And so it's not too late, and it's a good thing that this working group is looking at this. And in Clark County in particular, we have a safety and a medical concern that we can make the case for rail, because in terms of the ecological advantages, tree cover, this is a distribution of tree cover. The areas of the city that have the most tree cover, which is shown in yellow and green, as opposed to those that are orange and red that have the least tree cover, well, that roughly corresponds to the heat peaks and valleys. So if we look at the heat distribution in the city, the areas that are the most deep blue or the relatively coolest also tend to be those with the most trees, because the more trees we plant, the more ecologically sound, the more that they can combat the urban heat island effect. And the more red in this area, the less tree cover we have, roughly that corresponds to the hot areas of the city. And I also show the hospitals as shown in black dots here. So the size of the dots correspond to the number of heat-related illnesses, the ER visits, and that overlaps heavily with the deaths. And because there's a lack of tree cover in those areas, which we can't really solve until we build metro or intercity or light rail, because of the expansionary forces of car dependence, that area has the most ER visits for heat injuries. So that area, the east and the north, will remain a death trap until we can plant more trees. And we can't plant more trees until we reduce our car dependence and build more rail. That includes, at least, as indicated by the study, at least a regional stop can make a big difference, and it will in fact save lives. So those are my recommendations, is to build within city rail, but also across the regions. The Clark County Department of Public Works should be able to fund the first mile of light rail, apply for federal grants to pay for the rest. There's tax increment financing that can also fund this, and Las Vegas passed a bill last legislative session to enable that. And I can also recommend to the committee specialists on responsible transportation from cities that have championed rail. And if we do all of the above, we can reap the benefits. We can move more people more quickly, more cheaply, improve quality of life, retain trees, save lives because we're combating the urban heat island effect, reduce transportation greenhouse gas emissions because that is good for the all-in climate action plan, and reduce particulate pollution, that's good for our lungs, and also, if we take more cars off the streets, there will be less car accidents. If there's less car accidents, then over time that can reduce our car insurance rates, because here in Nevada we have the nation's leading car insurance rates. And I think that's something that we can all get behind. And so that's how you do public transportation right. How you don't do public transportation right is the Boring Company's loop. Now, the loop by the Boring Company is the biggest, most absurd transit scam I have ever heard of. And here's where the scam comes in. The Boring Company has been lying to policymakers all around the world that their form, which is Teslas and tunnels, can transport more people more quickly than any kind of rail. And take it from me, that is physically impossible. So any policymaker that they're saying this to should challenge them to provide even a shred of material evidence that that is true, but they cannot. Again, Elon Musk owns the Tesla company and the Boring Company, and Teslas and tunnels, which is what the loop is, depends upon Teslas. What they're doing is
let's keep it on what we can do, not an ad hoc going on about a company that's not here.
Sure.
I appreciate you.
Yes. So I would recommend not to expand rail in those cities. I've also been in contact with journalists that are in cities where the loop is being expanded, and real estate companies are lobbying to have stops being put at the foot of their door where they are spending the most money, as opposed to light rail, public light rail, where stops are determined by maximum usership. So and lastly, there's a certain forfeiture of that subterranean real estate. You can't necessarily build a metro or subway rail.
Let's focus on what we can do, not what else is being done. I appreciate it. I just don't want this to turn into an attack on a company that's not here.
Of course. So my recommendation would be don't expand the loop and accept no substitutes, no loopholes, so to speak. And I can recommend specialists for your working group for successful cities or from successful cities with rail. Happy to take questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions up here? Any? Commissioner Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You recommend that Clark County Public Works should build the first mile of light rail. Have you ever had any conversations with anyone from Clark County Public Works?
I'm in conversations with interlocutors who talk often with the Clark County Public Works Committee, and they believe that the money is there to at least fund the first mile, and I can recommend to the committee after the hearing.
What's an interlocutor?
Oh no, I mean, various people experts that I'm in contact with, that are in contact that often talk to Clark County Department of Public Works, and I can put you in touch with them after the hearing.
Okay. What is your estimate for what it would cost the Department of Public Works to put in the first mile of light rail?
At this time, I don't have those exact estimates, but I can be in contact with the committee afterwards.
Anderson, thank you for that presentation. Very interesting data. So by implication, you're saying that if we do create a rail system, we would have less cars on the road, increasing the tree canopy. By implication, does that mean we start ripping out roads, or how does the tree canopy automatically expand as we're removing cars?
Well, let's think about the project on Maryland Parkway. So it's expanding Maryland Parkway, and as you expand the roadways, you can't plant trees in those same areas. And so I might think of Paris as the city that kind of defeated the car, so to speak, rather than during this time period also. So what they did was that they started building more light rail during that time. And it's kind of the same trajectory we could take. It's not exactly tearing up roads, but if certain roads are, if traffic reduces as a result of more ridership on public transit, then that can be repurposed. So the way it would be a delivered effort by the government to repurpose the certain areas that are less used as a result of less traffic for tree cover, which is exactly how Paris and a few other places did it.
Just one follow-on question. Since you did this survey of a global nature,
yes,
did you find any purveyors of equipment and construction who are more cost effective. So, for instance, Loop brings to the table a conceivably new technology to create tunnels very rapidly. Did you find any place in the world where they're putting down rail lines at more cost-effective numbers than we consistently hear about?
We didn't look at the cost effectiveness of the rail, but rather just a global inventory of the different kinds of rail and how many lines, et cetera, although it's a very good question.
Anybody else down here? Skip, Senator Daley. Anybody up north?
I don't believe we have any questions up here. Thank you.
And Mayor Lawson.
No questions. Thank you.
Very good. Well, thank you, Professor Leffel, and safe travels. Justice Coalition and Aaron Harris representing the Toyabe chapter of the Sierra Club. And the floor is yours. Remember to state your name each time you turn the mic on.
Thank you, Chair Carter and members of the Regional Rail Transit Advisory Working Group. Again, my name is Jackie Spicer. I'm the Coalition Coordinator for the Nevada Environmental Justice Coalition. We are a statewide coalition of now 13 community organizations fighting for intersectional climate action and environmental justice through grassroots organizing and policy advocacy. We are here today because transportation choices significantly impact community health and equity. Globally, greenhouse gas emissions are the most significant drivers of climate change. And in Nevada, transportation is the largest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, making it a central issue in the fight against climate change. Expanding access to reliable public transit, such as passenger rail or light rail, can help reduce emissions from personal vehicle usage and mitigate the worsening impacts of deadly heat, drought, and air quality degradation. Access to safe and dependable public transportation is crucial for the sustainable growth and well-being of our communities. How we travel affects health outcomes, particularly in Las Vegas neighborhoods like the East Side, West Side, downtown, and areas surrounding the Strip, which are at higher risk for respiratory illnesses such as asthma. More cars on the road lead to more traffic and emissions, exacerbating these existing health risks. Additionally, rail and public transit enhance walkability, increasing foot traffic to local businesses, and support vibrant communities with good jobs. Electrified rail, in particular, offers significant environmental benefits by reducing emissions, improving air quality, and alleviating traffic congestion. Electrified rail is a proven solution, not a new experiment. Los Angeles once thrived on a robust electric rail system from 1902 to 1955. The Pacific Electric Railway connected Los Angeles to Long Beach and fueled unprecedented economic growth between the cities. It was abandoned by the transition to personal automobiles in the US. Prioritizing rail isn't about reinventing the wheel. It's about ensuring that our communities have access to safe, reliable, and affordable transportation options. Between 2023 and 2024, our coalition surveyed over 1,000 Nevadans between 11 counties statewide. We also hosted 18 community listening sessions in 5 different cities or towns in our state. And the result was a report produced by the UNLV Public Communication Initiative, housed in the Greenspun College of Urban Affairs, on Nevadans' priorities and opinions on affordable housing, public transportation, extreme heat, and water. A copy of this report has been provided to all members of the committee for your review. We asked community members during these surveys and listening sessions about their experiences using public transit and what changes they'd like to see in the future. I'm going to share a little bit of this feedback and want to mention that I'm doing so with nothing but respect and appreciation for the work done by the RTCs in Nevada. The 3 primary themes that emerged from this project in regards to public transportation were: 1, a repeated comment that public transportation was confusing or unreliable, so people had to make use of other options. Residents also discussed issues with bus arrival times or complained about delays that impacted their ability to use public transit for work or other necessities. Second, many residents expressed a strong desire to use public transportation, but felt that the routes were not expansive enough to cover their travel needs indicating a lack of access across the state. And respondents also highlighted broader safety concerns associated with taking public transit. A lack of bus stops often necessitated walking longer in unsafe conditions, such as extreme heat, which in 2021, the Gwynn Center reported Southern Nevada community members experienced the most heat when driving a personal vehicle without functioning air conditioning, or walking their children to school, or walking to a bus stop. The lack of bus stops also, the lack of safety also includes a lack of sidewalks, lighting at night, shade during the heat, or benches for those who need them. Safety was also a gendered issue in the responses we received, with women and non-binary identifying people in particular voicing concerns about harassment and vulnerability while using public transportation. Community members also spoke about their dreams for alternative modes of transportation in our community, such as light rail, trains, and expanded bike share options. Almost every comment included a direct comparison to other metro areas with existing light rail and how having those features in Nevada would improve the quality of life for residents and address many of the issues they are experiencing today. Ensuring our communities have access to safe and reliable transportation options is critical to the long-term sustainable growth of our state. And with that, I will pass it over to my co-presenter, Erin Harris, volunteer chair of the Transportation Committee for the Sierra Club Toyabe chapter.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Carter and members of the board for your attention today. Like Jackie said, my name is Erin Harris and I'm filling in for Olivia Tanager, who couldn't make it today due to an emergency. Today I'll discuss a variety of topics surrounding the benefit and need for regional rail transit system. I'll try to avoid overlapping with the first speaker as much as I can, but I do want to take what he said and connect it to Nevada specifically. Specifically, what are the mechanisms that it's going to take to make it happen, as well as how Nevada can benefit from these investments in the long term. So as we know, Nevada is growing rapidly. It's one of the fastest growing states. Nevada and Las Vegas and Reno are both very fast growing metro areas. But our development pattern has been primarily around highway expansions and the expectation of individual car ownership and operation, which comes with a financial burden for Nevada families, which affects affordability. Nevada's transportation system is dependent on private vehicles, which leaves limited alternatives for residents and visitors. What ends up happening is that we have a lot of different users ending up on the same congested corridors like I-15, I-80, and US 395. Residents, visitors, freight, and trade are all competing for the same road space on the roadway. We're also seeing rising infrastructure costs, not just for rail, but for also highway maintenance and expansion, in some cases up over 60% since the pandemic. We also have to look at the opportunity cost of sinking additional dollars into an already built interstate freeway system over more scalable transportation modes that will meet our needs. We also have to look at that there's a report from the Reason Foundation that ranks Nevada as 49th in terms of highway administrative disbursements. And what that means is that we are the second highest in administrative costs per lane mile of roadway. And so we have to look at ways that we can try to lower those costs and provide alternatives for how we build out our transportation system. As we know, tourism is one of the strongest arguments for improved regional transportation. We welcomed 52.4 million visitors in 2024. That's all of Nevada. Visitors spent $58.5 billion statewide last year. And the overwhelming majority of visitors are using cars to get around during their trip, whether it's their own private vehicles, taxi, rideshare, or rental car. However, tourism generates $12.8 billion in tax revenue annually, including $6.2 billion for state and local governments. As Las Vegas transforms into a sports and entertainment capital, we're seeing more constraints on our roadways that require major investments to handle surges when we have big events, like Formula One, conventions, concerts, and sporting events. We want to avoid transportation becoming a bottleneck to visitor growth, whether we're visiting our resorts or our public lands. Regional rail can provide a complement to our road network and provide more efficient mobility within our major economic centers. So what does regional rail look like in Nevada? Specifically in Southern Nevada, we see this as a system that connects the far corners of the valley to downtown in 30 minutes, which enables regional trips via transit in under an hour. This would be transformative for the region as residents would have a viable alternative to driving. And I'm basing those time with the Caltrain in San Francisco, which covers the same amount a similar amount of distance in that time period that I've given. The only permanent solution to traffic congestion, as we know, is viable alternatives to driving. We've also discussed potential corridors. As recently as 2015, so we've been studying the rail question in Nevada for close to 50 years. There was a study in 1975, was one of the first studies to look at light rail in Southern Nevada. And it found it economically viable back when we had a population of only 600,000. As recently as 2015, it was concluded that if we were to build some kind of rail system between the airport and the Strip and downtown, it would be the highest ridership rail line in west of the Mississippi. I'll also mention that Las Vegas Airport is the largest airport in the U.S. that currently does not have any plans to be connected by rail. In Nevada, from 2010 to 2020, Nevada's population grew by 15%, but vehicle miles traveled in the state grew by 34%, meaning both new and existing residents are adding more cars to the road at a higher rate. Compare us and our growth to similar fast-growing regions like Seattle, which from 2017 to 2023 added 80,000 residents to their population, but only added a net of 3,300 cars due to their investments in multimodal mobility. We also have to consider the cost of doing nothing. If Nevada doesn't diversify our transportation options, highway expansion costs will continue to rise as we spend billions on widening projects, as well as the maintenance of those wider projects. Road widenings do briefly reduce traffic, but induced demand leads more people to choose to drive more or drive further, so congestion quickly returns to previous levels. Air quality will continue to deteriorate and climate impacts increase as we continue to sprawl outwards. And this also leads to missed opportunities. We're seeing competing states like Utah and Arizona are investing in modern rail systems that attract the types of high-tech workers and industries that we hope to bring to Nevada. So we want to look at the benefits of investing in rail. And I want to look at this not just from a purely transportation standpoint, but really from a land use standpoint, which affects a number of things from housing to our economic development. Investing upfront in alternative travel modes like rail have lower long-term costs than continuing to widen and maintain our highway infrastructure. Rail is unique in that it enables denser, more productive land uses that generate more tax value than if we were to continue to expand outwards and annex low-density land while also reducing our infrastructure maintenance burden. Rail corridors also provide certainty. Businesses invest because the routes are visible, permanent, and reliable. Rail also extends the reach of walking, biking, as well as e-bikes and scooters. In addition, it also offers better mobility for those in wheelchairs, as it doesn't require driver intervention to board and use the system. I'll also mention that the RTC of Southern Nevada does have a high number of people who bring bikes and scooters on the bus for that last mile, and rail is something that makes it a lot easier to do that. Anyone that's taken a bookshelf onto the New York subway knows what I'm talking about. Ultimately, when you look at rail, it solves a type of problem that any kind of vehicle. Ultimately, rail solves an issue that can't be solved by other forms of rapid personal mobility, and that is one of geometry. And I think this picture does a good job of highlighting that example. You look at the number of cars in the circle, and it's about 50 cars, and that takes up a lot more space, not just on our roadways, but also our land itself is taken up by having to move people. Each person in the picture is using up to about 200 square feet on a small, and that's not including the buffer space that you need between each car. We also know that rail efficiently moves large number of people for long distances, especially where travel demand converges. A single lane of free-flowing highway traffic only moves about 2,000 vehicles per hour per direction. A single rail corridor, on the other hand, can move the same amount of people as a 20-lane highway, or 40,000 vehicles per person per direction. And that's about twice the size. A 40-lane highway would be twice the size of what we have with the Neon Gateway project here in downtown. I'll also mention that when you look at who benefits from a wider highway like this, it's not necessarily people that are in the immediate surrounding area, but it's the people that are having to drive in from long distances, from exterior parts of the valley, from other states, as well as trade also relies on that as an important corridor. And the fact that everyone is competing for the same road space leads to the types of congestion issues that we really want to avoid as we continue to grow. We know that rail systems are already proven. This graph shows the amount of people that can be moved on different modes, and it's been discussed about different types of rail. And what we want to see here is what is the maximum number of people, and really we want to look at, when you're talking about a multimodal system, every type of mode is going to have its own benefits and drawbacks. And really, we have to look at what is the benefit of rail is that allows us to really hit that surge demand. When we have those big events, we're able to move people efficiently and without a lot of friction. Personal rapid transit projects are a component of that as well. And when you look at not just the immediate resort corridor, but also the wider Southern Nevada region, we want to look for the types of transit that's going to give us that long-term potential. Personal rapid transit projects certainly offer those lower upfront capital expenditures. But when you look at the length of the time that that we're able to use those investments, it's a lot longer for rail. Rail systems, like have been mentioned previously, are already proven. They're used in over 200 cities on 6 continents. Rail infrastructure typically lasts about 100 to 150 years, which with some of those systems seeing lifespan beyond that. For reference, a highway's expected lifespan is about 50 years. Rail is also future-proof technology in that it uses standardized tracks, vehicles, and power systems that don't lock us into a single vendor for the lifetime of its usage. Rail also has a number of studies, well understood costs and risks, with decades of data, case studies, and delivery experience that give us predictable performance and maintenance needs. But like I said at the beginning, really the major benefit that I see from transit is the land use benefits. The benefit that is unique to high capacity transit is that we have the opportunity to do something called placemaking. And that offers us the opportunity to create walkable, human-centered environments that attract housing, jobs, and long-term economic activity. It also enables a type of infill development that we want to see, especially here in Southern Nevada, as we do have limited lands, and we want to make better use of those lands. And so you can see, oftentimes it comes to this sort of chicken and egg problem. Do we have enough of a potential ridership capacity in order to justify this investment? But when you look at it from a long-term lens, you see that the ridership follows where the investment goes, right? When we dedicate 90% of our transportation funding, let's say to roads, 90% of the people are going to be more intense to using that type of mode. And so when you have those infrastructure investments that allow us to build without the need for parking, that allows us to build higher density, allows us to build more courtyards and walkable spaces. And that way it doesn't come with the types of traffic and frustration that traffic is oftentimes the #1 complaint that you'll hear from residents about why they don't want to see new development. And having a high capacity transit system is one way to ameliorate that concern. Like I said, rail stations anchor that compact development, and the households near high quality transportation centers spend less on transportation, effectively lowering their cost of living. And it's worth mentioning that the Las Vegas area does have some of the highest transportation costs in the country. And this is also, when you look at, more broadly, this is also a part of Brightline's business model. Brightline is not just focused on operating the trains, but also building out destinations at each of their stations that they can then sell and collect the revenue from tenants and that kind of stuff. You also see this for Hong Kong's MTR system operates in a similar way. And that's how they're able to fund not just the operations, but transit, but also future expansions. So all this to say, where rail goes, investment follows. I think I want to highlight one of the studies that was done, which is surrounding the transit cost report. This came out of NYU's Marone Institute, and it looked at the question of why does building transit in the United States cost a lot more than what we see in other countries. And it's a really fascinating read. I won't go into it too much for the sake of time, but a lot of it has to do with minimizing our contingencies, as well as looking at how do we scale our projects faster, and as well as looking at different funding mechanisms to try to front load that development. And we've seen examples of where even here in North America that we've seen progress on this regard. A good example I like to bring up is the Montreal REM system, which is a regional transportation system that complements their existing metro system. They were able to build it for about, they were able to build it for $6 billion US for a 42-mile automated light metro system. And it was, they wrote the enabling legislation in 2017, they broke ground in 2018, and they opened in 2023. And at a cost of about $140 million a mile. That's in US dollars. When we look at transportation costs, you know, a lot of times we look at the capital costs, but what ends up happening is that our roadways end up shifting the cost of using that transportation system to the user in a greater degree. And we know that these costs are rising, and I've already covered about the need for more affordable mobility, especially as an economic driver for people to be able to access jobs. Also, I'll bring up a comparison to another state that has both a lot of highways and a lot of roads. And what they're seeing is that from their latest budget, they're spending about 25% more to maintain their highways than they are to maintain their passenger railways. For reference, Pennsylvania has about 5,700 miles of highway and about 1,000 miles of passenger rail, and that's including Amtrak and that sort of thing. We also know that transit is a wealth accelerator. Like I mentioned previously, transit is able to increase the land value around those transit stations, and therefore we're allowed to, we can expect to see more tax revenue from those property taxes around those stations, even without increasing the ad valorem rate at which we're assessing those properties. The example here I've shown is Indianapolis, which currently does not have any metro transit system. They just have a single Amtrak station. But you see that the effects of investing in rail transit are felt for generations. This is the black lines of their original streetcar system, and you can see that the development followed the transit investment, not the other way around, where we kind of wait for development to happen first and then go and build the transit. And this is that same picture, but kind of just shown on 3D scale to just show how, where especially transit lines meet. You see that confluence, the agglomeration that was mentioned previously. That's where you see the true value of having rail investment in terms of building on your land value. Without going into too much detail, there are a lot of different ways besides just sales tax and property taxes that we can fund transit. I think one that's worth mentioning is the tax increment financing district, which is where we know that those investments are going to increase the value of those properties around the station, around stations. And so we can borrow, we can bond against those future expected revenues from that investment. We also see other interesting, what I mentioned previously about Montreal's REM system. It's actually a public-public partnership. And the public entity is on one side is the city, the other public entity is the Ontario Retirement Fund. And so they were looking at where they could invest their money outside of the traditional stock markets, and has something that's a win-win-win for everyone, where when they invest in their city, it does better for their citizens, as well as their population continues to age, it gives them a greater source of revenue by building up the local economy, as opposed to just kind of investing in traditional methods. And it's all about diversification for them, right? They're a large investment firm, not too dissimilar to like CalPERS or Nevada PERS. Also mentioning when combined with zoning changes around those transit stations, you're going to see increased housing and development. We saw recently in California, SB 79 automatically upzoned to, I believe, 6 stories around transit stops. And this ensures that you're not having a situation where you have kind of very poor ridership, like we've seen in certain places where the transit stops is simply a parking lot and there's no development around that. So they see very low ridership. And by upzoning around those transit stops, they're able to ensure that local developers, you've made the investment in the transit, now it's time to allow the private investment to come in and really develop that community around that station. And that station really becomes a third place for people to be able to come and enjoy. And, small businesses can, you have the market, the vendors that are on the platform, that kind of thing. So what can the legislature do next? Specifically, we want to coordinate with state and we want to coordinate with other states as well as our federal partners to see how we can fast track the building of the systems that we want. We also want to ensure that rail and rail corridors are included in not just our long-range transportation planning, but also our long-range land planning. When we're plotting out a new area, we'll often, by default, we'll always make sure that there's roads in place, but really want to also make sure that there's a corridor for future transportation to be in place, especially as we continue to build outwards, both in northern and southern Nevada. And finally, we have to start somewhere. And by doing that, we can gradually expand over time, and we'll see the kind of benefits that we've seen from our interstate highway systems. We're able to take the benefits and extend them over a longer period of time, and that allows us to really go bigger when it comes to the amount of money that we want to spend, because it really is not just investing for a generation, but generations upon generations. So with that, I will open up to any questions. Thank you.
And with that, thank you very much. Are there any questions up here? Senator Daley, any questions in Carson City?
It doesn't appear to be. Thank you.
And Mayor Lawson?
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much. I appreciate you letting us move the previous presenter ahead, and very good presentation. Thank you. And with that, that brings us up to agenda item 6, discussion on emerging priorities, recommendations, and concerns identified by the Regional Rail Transit Advisory Working Group, us. So moving forward, we will go to agenda item 4. I already read that. Because this is our third meeting and we have heard from a variety of stakeholders so far, I think it's important that we check in as a group on our work and where we want to move next. To guide our discussion, you have a handout that in front of you. And first, as a reminder, this is a working group that's charged with studying the current state of regional rail and public transit, the need for regional rail and transit, 3, the potential funding sources to support the development of regional rail transit, and finally, public and private entities that should be involved in its development. And we're going to speak more specifically about funding shortly, so I want to hold off on that. However, for the other items on this list, I'd like to open the floor to the working group and what's on anybody's mind. Director Maynard.
MJ Maynard here for the record. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Chair, that next month we'll be talking about funding, correct?
That's tentatively the plan.
Okay.
That's dependent on if we have suggestions, because that's going to be my final ask, is if there's any suggestions from anybody on the committee for other organizations or groups that I should reach out to for presentations. So yes, funding we're going to save that.
So if I may, again, MJ Maynard here for the record, it may be worthwhile to have a executive summary type presentation from the Transportation Investment Business Plan that the RTC was part of. It really was a regional effort locally here in Southern Nevada, the business community and major stakeholders. But we could invite potentially someone that, again, we were part of it. We could bring somebody in that was really coordinating the effort to provide, again, it was a look at certainly the connection between mobility and economic growth here in Southern Nevada, if that's something that you'd like to see.
Yes, thank you very much. Senator Daley, is there some discussion topics that we should take a look at or suggestions for the next meeting?
We have a couple from Mr. G and my friend down here on the right. So go ahead first.
Thank you, Senator Daley. Chair Carter, Related to the funding, but a separate issue, is the organizational framework around passenger rail. As I understand, as a Regional Transportation Commission, RTC, we have the authority to run buses, but we do not have the legal ability to run rail. Likewise, I'm told that NDOT themselves do not have the ability to operate passenger rail in the state of Nevada. I think as we talk about looking at funding and looking at potential grants and looking at grant opportunities, there needs to be a discussion on who those potential grant recipients could be. I mean, I can't apply for an FRA grant if I can't operate rail. And so, it's just a look at how we can expand the authorities of an RTC or how we can support the creation of other entities who could perhaps operate passenger rail in that space. I think would be really beneficial, especially in our case in Northern Nevada. We're talking about multiple jurisdictions across county lines and even potentially across state lines, and having the framework and legislative ability to actually organize and seek to obtain funding from federal sources would be beneficial to us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gee. And yes, we will work on that, getting a report on all of those things you just brought up. That's a very good point. And another one from up north.
Mr. Chair, this is John Hester, and Mr. Gee pretty well stated what I was going to bring up is, do we have the correct operating authority, and does that reach across jurisdictional lines and possibly state lines? Or are there other models that already are in place, like joint powers authorities, things like that, that we could use? Same general topic as what Mr. G brought up.
Very good. Thank you very much. And Mayor Lawson.
Mr. Chair, I have one comment.
I want to bring up.
We'll let Mr. Lawson go, Mayor Lawson go, and then we'll come back to you, Senator Daly.
Yep, perfect. Thank you.
I apologize for that.
Yeah, Ed Lawson for the record. The presentation that we saw at the Washoe RTC last week, I think we need to disperse and then talk about. It's very enlightening as far as the ridership stations, the kinds of trains you need, the whole 9 yards, and what we can and cannot do with the UP. UP is notoriously not that open to sharing tracks. So that report was an enlightening report, and we will, Mr. Gee has that report, and we will make sure that we get it dispersed to the committee.
Thank you very much. Yeah, please make sure that that gets to our committee director, Alex Drozdoff. And now, Senator Daly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I was just along the lines of what the other two people in Northern Nevada were kind of mentioning when I was, looking at the 4 questions of the current state of regional and public transit. We've got a great deal of information there. The need for rail, I think the case has been made. We're going to talk about funding later. And then public and private entities that should be involved in its development. And similar to what they were just saying, on the authority to do this stuff, and there's a lot of moving parts with that. I know there's separate labor issues, a lot of the rail federal laws and various things go back 150 years when we were trying to develop rail across the United States. So there's a lot of things that we don't know about every single day. And then it reminds me, and sorry if I get off track a little bit, when we're looking at like the TRPA and the oversight up there, and there's only one basin, so there's only one state, right, for what we're looking at. But then there's 5 counties in the 2 states. There's 2 states, 5 counties in the 2 states, 1 municipality, and several other little turfs, right? And so I would think that we would try to set something up where we would eliminate as many of those turf disputes on who's in charge. We want RTCs to be involved. We want DOT to be involved, to have input for planning and various things. But we might want to look at some type of entity that has joint power, agreement powers, and various things to be the point for getting grants and developing what would be the most feasible, what would have the most impact as we develop, and try to eliminate turf disputes on who's in charge. If that makes sense, I'm sure you've seen similar things in your career over the years that you've studied these types of things. So I just think that we might want to look at a joint powers type agreement. I think there should be one in the north, one in the south. I don't think necessarily the whole state, but open to discussion on that. But that's just one of the things I think we want to be wary of and make sure we don't have too many people competing in the same lane, right?
Very good, Senator Daly. And yes, it's noted, and we're going to work on figuring out what we need to get, who we need to get reports from, who maybe we need to have presentations from, and setting us up so that our meeting in April, we can have a robust conversation discussion going into, because we're rapidly approaching, because we need to finalize a report by June. So we've only got 3 meetings left. And with that being said, is there any comment that any of this is, or ideas that have been popped up because of the conversation? Mr. Snow.
For the record, Jacob Snow. Mr. Chairman, I think we've heard some really well thought out, well structured, and well delivered presentations today. And I want to thank everyone who's done so. And some of the things that have come to my mind are, I know that across the country, there are states that have their own rail compact agreements. Washington and Oregon comes to mind for their Amtrak service, and several states across the country cooperate across state borders for joint rail commissions. From a policy standpoint, I think that's very interesting for us to consider, especially when we have bright line service that's hopefully going to be coming soon between California and Nevada. And one of the things that I have tried to pay a lot of attention to, and what was brought up today by our last presenter, was I thought some very thoughtful discussion about the benefits of doing integrated, not just separate land use planning and then separate transportation planning, but the integration of transportation and land use planning together. And that's when you come up with wonderful things like transit-oriented development. And when you have that type of density that can come into a specific corridor where rail could go into, all of a sudden you have opportunities to finance rail that go along without raising taxes, because you have all this development that can come in around a rail corridor. And if you can capture some of that property tax and set it aside to pay for transportation and land use infrastructure investment, that's how you can pay for some of these types of projects that have been successful around the country. That, I think, is really worth discussion. And maybe another idea is, there has been a lot of discussion about, well, we need to have passenger service on this freight corridor as well as the continuing operation of freight corridors. There are some states that, from a policy standpoint, have passed laws regarding who can use and how they can use that particular corridor. And I think from a policy standpoint, that might be of interest to this committee.
Very good points.
Mr.
And
Chair, we do have
going
one more
forward,
comment
in
up
the
here.
interim between our next meeting, Alex will be reaching out to everyone to see suggestions in putting together the agenda for the next meeting. With that being said, is there anybody else
We have one more.
would like to make a question or comment? Go
One
ahead,
more.
Senator Daly.
One more comment up north here, Mr. Christensen.
Gabe Christensen with Smart TD. I think a good group to reach out to would possibly be the National Association of Rail Passengers. And then also, as far as working with Union Pacific, Mayor Lawson's correct. Union Pacific is difficult to work with regarding passenger rail. Majority of the Class 1 railroads are. I had reached out to Alex today via email to possibly give a presentation on existing infrastructure, at least up north, that's all UP owned, and explain the benefits of a partnership with Union Pacific and a possible rail, passenger rail transportation up here, how it would benefit them with us adding to their infrastructure. So hopefully I could present next meeting.
Thank you very much. Anything else? None appearing. We'll go to agenda item 7, public comment. With that, we'll start down here in the south. And don't forget that if you're not joining us in person in Carson City or Las Vegas, you can call 888-475-4499, then entering the meeting ID of 838-555-6412, and then press pound. And as always, you can email comments to regionalrailtransit@lcb.state.nv.us. And with that, we'll go to our first person down here in Las Vegas. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Vinny Spottelson for the record, CCSD teacher. I appreciate you having this on spring break so I could be here. I'll see you again in June. I am going to keep this quick because we're over time. I'm also candidate for Assembly District 41. I've been campaigning about this. I've been pitching this to the building trades. I got an interesting question this morning that I thought I would like this committee to consider as well in the long list. And you already are right on the money in terms of how do we structure this? How do we pay for it? But one more thing is when we actually get to the building the stations and building around the stations and whatever tax we figure out, I got a question today from the building trades, which was, how do we ensure those jobs are high quality jobs that go to union workers or provide PLAs or prevailing wage? And so I think if there's a way to investigate or look at, okay, if we're going to create special property tax districts or tax increment financing, is there a way to incentivize that we have those types of union work on the construction site? Because what we see in cities all across the country is that the areas around these train stations and around the world blow up, right? These become huge meccas of new developments, high rises, new businesses, transit-oriented development we've been talking about. So if there's a way that we can ensure not just that the rail jobs go to union labor, but that the construction that's associated with the revitalization that comes in goes to project labor agreements and things like that as well. I think that'd be helpful to have in the list of recommendations for the policies that come out. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much. Anybody else down here in Southern Nevada? With that, we'll move up to Carson City. Doesn't appear there's anybody in Carson City, and we'll go to AVS. Is there anybody on the phone lines?
If you would like to provide public comment, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Again, if you would like to provide public comment, please press *9 now. Caller with the last 3 digits, 675, please press *6 to unmute your phone. You may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Carter and members of the working group. For the record, Matt Parker, Mattparker. I was not able to make the first part of the meeting, so forgive me if I'm duplicating effort here, but I just thought it was worth mentioning that today is National Transit Employee Appreciation Day, so please join me in recognizing our transit workers and thanking them for the work they do to provide us with safe transportation. Thanks to all of you for the working on the working group for what you are doing to bring us forward to a brighter future for transportation and perhaps to bring a smile to Chair Carter's face while you're all slaving away today, taking care of the governance of our state. I'm spending a portion of this beautiful afternoon working on my railroad motor car. So y'all have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mr. Parker. Is next caller, please.
Chair, there are no other callers for public comment.
Well, thank you very much. And I want to thank everybody here, the presenters, the public that showed up, and all of the committee members for a very good, productive meeting. And with that being said, we're adjourned.